Everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I am delighted on this episode to be talking with someone who's been authoring and creating for many, many years now, and that is Mark Ellis. May I call you Mark?
Please do.
All right. Well, thank you for joining, Mark. And I'll mention a couple of titles that you've worked on, a couple of characters that you're famous for. The Justice Machine being one of those titles, DeathHawk being one of those characters, Cryptozoica, and more recently, you've been crafting in worlds like Outlanders. So, curious about your journey to comics and how you decided comics were the space that you wanted to create in.
Well, like a lot of creators my age, probably my generation, the old adventures of Superman TV series was the gateway drug, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak. And I watched it as a little kid. It was in perennial reruns. And I do remember distinctly being in like a five and dime in Flora, Indiana, and seeing a issue of World's Finest that had Superman on the cover. And it also had Batman on the cover, and I didn't know who he was, but he was intriguing. And I thought, I'm gonna get this, and that was it. It was a silly story, but then again, I was like 4 or 5, so I do remember the story about the adventures of the Super Pet
Oh, yeah.
with
You
art
were
by Dick
connected
Sprang.
immediately.
Yes. So I stayed, off and on in comics for the rest of my life, basically.
hmm hmm
Then at some point or another, I decided I don't know if it was exactly comics I wanted to do. It was just the creative thing. Just wanted to be a creator
hmm
by my early teens. That's what it seemed like that's what I wanted to do for a living. So eventually, in the 70s, I tried to break into professionally and almost made it, but had some problems with, I'd hooked up with a Marvel artist who was, it wasn't a good deal. So I
Uh,
won't go any further. He's gone now, but I won't mention his name. So doesn't make any difference at this late date, anyhow. So
yeah,
that's basically how that got started. But didn't I and ended up going into other forms of writing and journalism, reporter, things like that, before I got back into comic books in the mid 1980s.
yeah. That now I mentioned a couple of titles there, but any particular experiences as you look back and forward on your career that have been especially positive?
Most of them, I've been very, very lucky, to be honest, except for that one experience that I just referred to. Most of my collaborations with artists have been great.
Mm,
Not so much with publishers. I've had a lot of conflicts with publishers. Not rarely from the creative end, even though that's been the case too. But most of the artists I've worked with, I've been very lucky. We've all hit it off pretty well. I worked with Adam Hughes when he was first starting, and we had a lot of fun working on DeathHawk.
mhm.
And of course, I made the acquaintance of Jim Mooney, who was the famous artist for DC and Marvel in the from the 40s through the 80s. He was best known for Supergirl. And then we got to collaborate. I guess he was pretty much my best friend. And everything else, pretty much everybody I've worked with from that I've ever wanted to work with, I've had a really good experience with. Pablo Marquez, Don Heck,
Mm,
Daryl Banks, who is just, fantastic. More recently, I began working with a younger artist named Christopher Nye, who
mm,
he lives in South Carolina, and he has a great classic style, which I just love. And even more recently, I reconnected with an artist, animator, Del Barris, who may not be familiar to you from the old Transformers cartoon.
mm,
And
mhm.
we've been working together on a few things. Most recently, I this is our most recent. It's a second Lakota graphic novel. It's just came out at mid-December and currently on sale, obviously. And I made upon Chris and I to do a little logo and things like
Yeah.
that. So that's been a lot of fun. But I've worked on so many comics, believe it or not. I kind of sometimes I forget which I've done, you know,
Yeah.
because I spent 15 years. I really only wrote comics full time for about 8 years. And then I got into becoming a full-time novelist, wrote for the Gold Eagle imprint of Harlequin Enterprises for about 15 years, and the Executioner, Mac Volan, and Deathlands as James Axler. And then a little bit later, after Deathlands, I created a new series which still had the James Axler pseudonym called Outlanders. And these those were pretty popular, but then I became, known too much as James Axler,
Mm,
unfortunately.
mm, mm.
you know. So it got to the point where even Harlequin Enterprises, the publisher, forgot who I was and would address email to me as Dear James.
That's a full pseudonym right there.
That got a
Wow.
little silly. And then, of course, a book like this, where the name is big, with, like that. Even though my real name is on the indicia, on the inside of it, it got to be kind of a pain.
Mm, mhm.
And the they went out, the Gold Eagle imprint went out of business in, I don't know, about 2015. So now they're basically, the books are still out there as audio books, full cast audio books by a company called Graphic Audio.
Oh, nice, nice.
And Kindle, of course, you can get the ebooks still. So they're still around, and that's, I guess, at some point or another, you can look at it this way. And anytime, as long as we still have technology, people can access my work somehow or another.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's part of the story that lives on. What has the creative process been like between comics and prose?
With doing comics, I know a lot of people like to write scripts, but I
Mhm.
find that very mechanical, tedious. And to me, it's also difficult for the artist. I mean, it's really easy to type, 2,000, barbarians come over the hill in panel three, you know,
Right.
and say, like, one's riding a horse, one's riding the other guy, whatever. And since I think very visual, I just decided I like the layout breakdown method the best. So when I write comics, I prefer to do my own little breakdown, so to speak.
Oh,
And
nice.
that way I can have some control over the text, where the balloons and the captions are located.
Hmm.
I don't write the dialogue until after the art is completed. I like to write to the art. So if the artist has some ideas and wants to put some changes in there, that's just fine, because it's really more fun for me. It's a little more tedious, it's a little more time consuming than
Hmm.
doing scripts, but it's not as tedious, I find. So let me give you a little example here. This is by Del Veris for this second Lakota graphic novel. So this is kind of what
Nice.
I gave him, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
And this is what he did. So that's great. Color by Deirdre DeLay, obviously. There's colors, but I just find it more enjoyable
Yeah.
with the layouts.
We need to
And
have
then
that collaboration.
Yeah, it's more of a collaboration. I mean, when you're writing a book, and I've written, sort of forgotten how many I've written, 50 maybe. Not
Wow.
all Outlanders, but I mean other things. But the you just want to break, in my opinion. I like
Mhm.
doing the collaboration. I like doing the art, as bad as it is. And then I like seeing what the artist can do with it. He doesn't have to follow it, but I've every artist I've worked with prefers it that way. Like, ended up, maybe they never worked that way before, but then afterwards they prefer it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I look at comics creations as we Melissa and I wrote a book some years ago called The Everything Guide to Graphic Novels,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and we have a lot of, little, tips throughout how to do things and whatever. It's not a hard and fast type of this is how it must be done, but by the same token, it's not as easy as the Commonwealth seem to think it is.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, I remember at one point being in a bookstore and seeing a graphic novel version of the Three Musketeers. So I picked it up, and it literally was stick figures. Literally, that's all it
Huh.
was. And then,
Interesting.
yeah, the person, the cashier, or whoever, the manager of the store said, "Yeah, we haven't had much luck selling graphic novels." And I said, "Well, this is what you're choosing to sell. I'm not surprised."
Yeah.
Come on. This is a weird gimmick. That's not a graphic novel.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that level of artistry for sure, and storytelling, attention to detail.
Well, as I said, I enjoy working with artists a great deal. I enjoy the collaboration. I've really never had a bad collaboration with anyone.
Yeah.
Particularly, Jim Mooney, who I worked with on the the Star Wars Star Rangers comic,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
was actually was a little bit presaged things like the Expanse and such, with the setup of a solar system, a space situation where it was run by corporations. So that was actually a lot of fun. And it was basically, lifted for an old TV show in the 90s called Star Space Rangers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
we saw no royalties from that.
If uh if I'm a reader out there and I want to find some of your work or connect with you, what are some of the best ways that I can do that?
Well, if you want to try to find some of my work, a lot of the original comics that I did for venture publication, like DeathHawk and stuff, they're not all that expensive, but they're not easy to find either, if you know what I mean. It's
Mhm.
it's it's not necessarily that they're particularly rare. So over the last few years, I had um, worked with a British publisher compiling the things as to, basic graphic novel setups with, compile it and then adding new artwork to the previously published material, like this one with additional art by Jeff Slimmons, who did some fantastic work on it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So you can look for that either on Amazon or basically any online bookseller. You can occasionally, somebody told me they found a bagged not the whole series of my old Ninja Elite series I wrote for Adventure in a Dollar Tree.
Oh wow. Huh.
So, and I was like selling them in a bag. Okay. So I'm guessing somebody found an old storage unit somewhere
Uh-huh.
that, decided, I know what I'll do. I'll just put them in bags and try
Huh.
to sell them to these retail outlets, for $1.50 or $2 or whatever they were.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. It's you never know where the work lands, right? You never know where it shows up, I guess.
Well, you never know. I mean, it's sort of like that. This is a kind of a funny story. We were briefly with another publisher, Melissa, my wife and I, called Millennium, that was down in Florida.
Hmm.
And we were publishing various comics, a couple of licensed properties like The Mummy and Doc Savage, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. But for some reason, the publisher had overprinted a copy of one particular issue of The Mummy, like number 4 or something, by an incredible amount. We don't know why. So we had to put them in a storage unit. And when we split up from the publisher, uh, he stopped paying on the storage unit, obviously. And then a few months later, I was getting reports from people, friends and such, and even I saw it, of comic book dealers like in flea markets with tons of Mummy number 4. Sort of like that old Seinfeld episode about the puffy shirt.
Uh-huh.
Somebody
Uh-huh.
had paid him to wear a puffy shirt on a TV show, and he didn't, and he made fun of it, and it didn't sell. And then
Hmm.
the next thing you saw was all these homeless people wearing them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I remember that one. Yeah.
so that was just one of those weirdnesses about comics publishing in the 90s. You have
Yeah.
one big hit and then it all was gone.
Yeah. Well, as we close out, any particular titles or projects that you're working on right now that you'd like to share
Well,
for listeners?
the moment I'm working with artist and animator Steve Gordon, who was the main character designer on the 90s X-Men
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
television show. And we're doing an adaptation of Werewolf of Paris,
Love it.
which was the basis of an old Hammer movie called Curse of the Werewolf with Oliver Reed. And that's kind of about it as far as I can see in the future. As far as prose goes, I'm currently working on a short story for a Destroyer anthology, Remo Williams, and
Nice.
Chun.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm I've been retired the last few years, basically. Thank God I don't have to do this for a living anymore. Good thing too. But, so we moved to from Rhode Island to Ireland. So we've been here 7 years now. So
Oh,
I don't
lovely.
feel the push to do too much anymore, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
pick and choose. I'd like to do another Lakota if the sales on this warrant, but you never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guess I'll just take a wait and see attitude.
Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. Well, I appreciate the time. I'm wishing you well as you enjoy Ireland and retirement,
Thank you.
and looking forward to the work that is to come as well.
Well, I hope people enjoy watching this. Hope I could have entertained or, or edified or educated just a little bit. So,
Yes, yes.
well, thank you so much.
Great conversation. Thank you.